So
I'm gonna
it
put
can
you on
be,
blast right now in front of my audience. Are you saying that Magico speakers seem to be better designed than Wilson audio speakers? And
well,
in your estimation, you don't get to be a successful loudspeaker manufacturer if you don't really know what the hell you're doing. So I'm
right.
wondering if you can reason or you can give me your own explanation as to why you think this is, because I gotta believe Dave, when he was with us, I mean,
Hmm.
he knew of this. Like, I can't believe that he didn't see the shortcomings of this loudspeaker. I've gotten some feedback from some people that are very close to Wilson Audio. Obviously, I don't state my sources. The new Alexia V has time alignment issues with the woofers. I know this from someone very credible. Again, I don't know for sure
Hmm.
if this is something that is true or not true. But it's very hard right now, from my understanding, to place the Alexia V properly in the room due to these time alignment issues with the woofers of the
Okay.
speaker. And this also includes, they're going to kill me for saying it, but I got to say it, the Stanheim 3.0s are having the same issues. Of course, you got to remember something, Danny. I mean, for us average Joes, when it comes to this, we're not as deep in the trenches as you are and others, right? As far as
Right.
discovering these abnormalities with the speaker design, we're just sitting down listening. And if we liked it, we
Right.
cut the check, right? Not knowing that there are some issues going on with the
Sure.
loudspeaker design. So it's not really shocking what you're saying to me and what you have found. So at a high level, we're talking about the fractions of the cabinet. Obviously, they used, in your opinion, the wrong woofers, because that made the speaker extremely difficult on the partnering amplifier.
Hmm.
And I believe there's a third thing that you mentioned. What was that?
Just the time arrival of the drivers. They're somewhat in phase if you sit right at tweeter axis, but above tweeter axis, they become out of phase and there's a hole. Which I know a lot of people
Oh,
say, well, I'll just sit on axis. I don't listen standing up, but that isn't how it works. A speaker, the output of a speaker is what you hear in all directions and how it interacts with your room. And if you look at the off axis response and you see the off axis is doing this and there's a big hole, well, that's how your ceiling reflection is going to reflect that. It's going to reflect that sound and your floor reflection and your sidewall reflections. It creates what we call a power response or an in-room response, which is what you guys see when you're setting up a speaker and you're trying to dial
yeah.
it in with a sub, and you're taking maybe a room EQ wizard measurement or something, and you're looking at it and it's like, man, that thing looks rough. It doesn't look like what they advertise the response is, where they're just measuring it on axis. The off axis comes into play just like everything else. So you kind of have to take that into consideration. So they did have a phase issue as you, and if you're seated in front of that speaker with it playing, and you just stand up, you may notice like, man, the highs just dropped out of it when I did that. Well, that's because there's a hole there. It's just a matter of time
Wow.
arrival. So when I went back and designed a network for it, I maintained that response, that time window. It's the same over a broad range, so you can stand up or sit down, and it's still exactly the same. And it sounds like you're mentioning that maybe there's some of those problems with those other models. I don't know. I only have experience with one other Wilson audio speaker that we did an upgrade for, and we shot a video on it. It's been a couple of months ago. A customer brought in one of the stand mounts, and we did something on that. So if someone wants to see what we did with that, they can see it in one of those videos.
Now, I know you also mentioned that you were critical of the modules, the upper modules of the speakers, the taller Wilson audio speakers. You mentioned that you are questioning that design as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I look at that and I see, when you're putting drivers in their own little pods like that, I mean, you're
Mhm.
kind of creating some of the same effects that I'm seeing with this model, and that there's some felt or foam or something that they've got right around the driver, but then they've got a,
Yep.
a frame around each one. It's like, man, the last thing you want is something sticking out there for the sound to reflect off of. It's going to be the exact same thing we just explained. And also, I see driver spacing becoming an issue. Like, here's the tweeter, and here's the driver that it crosses to, and they're spaced too far apart. for drivers to be spaced that far apart, the crossover point would have to be really, really low. And there's kind of a rule of thumb as far as what the acoustic centers are, how far away they are, versus how high you can cross those between each other that they don't start sounding like they're coming from two different places. I've always kind of given the illustration of let's put the tweeter on the ceiling, let's put the mid range on the wall, and let's put the woofer, in the closet back here. Well, obviously you listen to that, it's not going to sound like one coherent speaker. It's going to sound like stuff's coming from different places. And so you start moving those closer and closer together. At some point, the wavelengths are so long where they're crossing and they're so close together, they don't sound like they're coming from different places. They sound like it's just a harmonious blend of everything like it's supposed to. But as soon as you start getting the spacing in those drivers further apart, you start running into that situation where you can now, there's the tweeter, there's the vocals, there's the lows. You're starting to spread things out to a point where it doesn't blend like it's supposed to. And as they're spacing that stuff apart on those bigger models, I can start looking at that thinking, they might have an issue there. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Like, look, if you look again at that speaker right behind you, the tweeter faceplate is almost non-existent. They've made it very small. It probably has a neodymium motor on it, and they're keeping those acoustic centers close together. That's pretty wise. That's an easy way to make sure that there's coherency within the speaker, that it's not going to sound like different drivers. So
I'm gonna put you on blast right now in front of my audience. Are you saying that Magico speakers seem to be better designed than Wilson audio speakers, and in your estimation?
From an engineering point of view, I can see that they've done their homework. When I look at that speaker, there's a lot of things there that stick out. And, oh yeah, they know what they're doing. They're doing something.
A lone wolf. If a lone wolf, I know you're watching it. You heard it. You heard it from Danny. Okay, he's giving you kudos when it comes to your loudspeakers. Okay.
Have to, and I've heard them numerous times at shows and different things, and they never disappoint. Like those speakers, they always sound good. Like they do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a very good time with the Q7s at the moment. So, but with that said, let's transition over to the changes that you have made. If you can talk a little bit about what enhancements you've made, and maybe even share if you have any parts that you can share on camera with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about kind of what I did as far as fixing the diffraction, designing a crossover that keeps the drivers in phase over a big range. Another thing is just the quality of parts. Again, you go back 20 years, the quality of the parts that they had then versus the quality of parts we have now, it's kind of a no-brainer. There's going to be clarity and resolution and things like that are going to be a big deal. And I've got one of the crossovers here that came out of that thing, and they pot everything, which in a way it's good marketing because they can say, well, this is resonance control. We don't have a resonance in the crossover because we potted it. And of course, no one can see what they did either because they potted it. But my issue was that the external resistors they're using in the tweeter circuit and stuff are just clipped in with steel screws. It's like, oh man, it's like, why would you put ferrous material in the signal path? It doesn't make any sense, And another thing that with this plate on the back where the binding posts are, they tightened the screws and stuff down on it, and then they just soldered it all on. So it's like, wow, I can't even undo these things. You can't. It's hard to work on this stuff, So, a few issues. The wiring though that they used on there, it feels like nylon jacketed wire. It's not PVC coated stuff, so not bad. What you'll see here is just the crossover that I designed that's going back in there, and I've mounted it on the bottom panel that screws back onto this thing. So it made it easy to mount a whole new crossover, and they put a 200 and something microfarad value capacitor down in the lower section of this thing, so that it was blocking all the low frequency from the woofer and stuff. Well, what I do, obviously, is I've got a bundle here it's similar. It's a little bit bigger value, but it's only in the woofer circuit. The tweeter circuit is not having to pass through these larger caps. So there's 400 mic values there and a little bitty bypass cap so that it discharges them faster. We got coils from US Coils, which are some of the best coils money can buy. They're made right here in the US. There's a Sonic cap, which is right there in the tweeter circuit, which ironically was made by Railcap, which is now owned by Wilson Audio. Funny thing.
Hmm.
So in effect, they're actually the manufacturer of the cap that's going into the tweeter circuit. So I don't know how they're going to complain about that. And it's got our resistors on there, so good quality stuff. And the wire is it's 4/9 pure copper and polyethylene. It's solid core wire, and it's really good internal wire. And so it's going to get high quality stuff. And anytime we do upgrades, we put much higher quality parts in there. That's part of the upgrade. Another part of it is the tube connectors that go in there. That's replacing the binding post. So this is the best connection money can buy right now. It's a hollow copper tube. It's high contact area, but it's low mass. And we put these things in everything, and it just makes it really simple and easy. So all that's going in.
Very nice.
So if somebody says, "Oh, well, you're just putting junk parts in there," or what? Man, parts quality is a lot better than it was 20 years ago.
Drivers are staying the same though. You're not changing the woofers, even though they're not to
No,
your liking. They're staying the same.
but they were
Okay.
good drivers. There's nothing wrong with the drivers. I mean, they did a lot of things right with this thing. I love the material that they're made out of. And if you can
Composites.
look,
Yeah.
let's look inside real quick. I want to show you something. I don't know if you can see it, but on each side,
Yep.
there's a great big thick added layer there, and they've got some
Yep.
foam on there. So it's like they've designed this really well as far as damping out the resonances.
Yeah.
Whereas we see this a lot. Speakers come in, and I take measurements on it, and sometimes I'll do a frequency sweep, and we'll see how bad the cabinet's resonating. Like, is the cabinet just flexing and buzzing? And 9 times out of 10, everything that comes in has resonance issues. You can put an accelerometer on there, and I can do a sweep, and you can see lots of resonances. The way these are made and the material that they're using, they really don't have those kind of resonance problems. And that goes a long way. When you're listening to music and you're not hearing cabinet noise, you're just hearing just what the speakers reproduce, and that's really great. And they have nice cabinets, man. They covered that
They
area,
are. They
you know.
definitely are very big on that. I mean, even their
Yeah,
latest composite that they use on their latest models is next level. I mean, a lot of the
yeah.
magazines are raving about that. Very, I mean, almost no resonance.
Hmm.
Um,
Very
of
good.
course, I am still going to question the design still, right? Because you still continue to see the felt, you still continue to see the edges that you were talking about. That really
Big
hasn't gone
problem.
away.
Right.
So I'm assuming the problems remain, right, based on your own
Maybe.
research and based on what you're saying to me. But it is interesting to see that they have all these issues, and I wonder if this is because they were trying to hit a certain budget, or what would be the reasoning, in your opinion? Because I mean, look, you don't get to be a successful loudspeaker manufacturer if you don't really know what the hell you're doing. So I'm
Right.
wondering if you can reason
Well,
or you can give me your own explanation as to why you think this is, because I gotta believe Dave, when he was with us, I mean,
mhm.
he knew of this. Like, I can't believe that he didn't see the shortcomings of this loudspeaker
I
with
don't know.
what you explained to us. I mean, so what would be your reason, in your opinion, as to why this happened? Because maybe, sometimes it's not a cost no object speaker. It isn't.
Right.
But I could also argue that point to myself by saying, well, none of the parts that you're suggesting are considered cost no object parts, right? You're not
Right.
necessarily giving those the most expensive gold cables for the inside of the speaker with
Right.
insane stuff. You're just saying the way it was laid out. Tell us what do you think is the reason for this,
Well,
that this was accepted? And by the way,
yeah.
Stereophile also show the measurements of this
Yeah.
speaker, and so they were not necessarily dishonest. They were very honest about how it measured. They tied very close to what you
They looked
measured.
almost identical to what I measured. I took John Atkinson's measurement and I cropped it to 200 hertz and up, and I skewed it to the same scale. And you look at it, my measurement and their measurement, and you could almost put them on top of each other. It's the same measurements. But they still got a great review. And I want to
You
say
did.
too that just because a speaker has certain issues doesn't mean that it's not a great sounding speaker. I mean, there's speakers that sound great despite the fact that they're not perfect. There's a lot of speakers that you might listen to and they sound beautiful, but they don't have any bottom end. Well, for some people that kills it right there. It's like, oh, it doesn't
Yep.
have any bottom end. Well, if you're just listening to a female vocal with a piano, and it may be the perfect speaker for you. It's still good despite the fact that it's not perfect and doesn't have to be
Right.
perfect. At this level, they've done so much right and it's done so well. It still sounds good. Is there room for improvement? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's always room for improvement. I'm constantly trying to improve my own products. It's like
Hmm.
anytime you learn new things, it's like, you know what? I can incorporate what I just figured out on this back on this other model, and let's go back and revisit that. It's a process you go through, and you know it's the same with every company, or they would be producing the same speaker year after year after year. They're always making improvements and stuff, and so even looking at some of their newer models, they've gone to a different tweeter that I can tell you right now doesn't have as wide of a dispersion as the inverted focal tweeter. The focal tweeter really has a wide off axis response. So if you look at the newer models and the way they're making them with that dome tweeter that sits forward of that, it may not have as much of a surface reflection issue and diffraction off of the edges as it did with the focal tweeter. It may not be as bad of a deal. So they may just look at it as, it's just part of the marketing. It's more important to them that it have a certain look and a certain nostalgia, or a certain big phallic symbol speaker, that
Right.
people can hang their hat on and be proud of and talk about, and it's a status deal for them, and it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect in every way, and they can still be successful with it. You
Yeah,
know,
no, I mean this speaker here, I mean it's my
yeah, I
time
see
with
it
the
there.
XBX was great, but you definitely have gone away from their focal
Yep.
tweeter and they're using a soft dome tweeter now. I believe now they're making it in-house, some carbon fiber soft dome tweeter that they use on
Hmm.
the Alex V, and I believe the Alexia V now too, including
Right.
the Sasha V. And so I can say that one of their biggest criticisms in their early days was how bright the speakers were when they
Yeah,
were using this Focal tweeter. Since then, they
I agree.
definitely have gotten, I wouldn't call it warmer, but they don't sound as
Oh man.
bright as they once did. But that said, there is always those that are big Focal tweeter lovers.
It was a love hate relationship for me. We used it in our first two models that we produced. And if you had the right capacitor in line with it, and I say right, I mean, if you had a film and foil capacitor, like a tinfoil type capacitor in line with it, and you
Right,
had it on tube gear and you had it in a treated room, it was beautiful sounding. It had great resolution and detail, and everything about it was beautiful. But if you had a capacitor, maybe it was aluminum foil or it was just an inexpensive cap with solid state gear, and it was in a room that wasn't treated very well, that tweeter could take your head off. Like it was
yep,
too
right here.
much. It was aggressive. There
Yeah.
you go. That's those tweeters, and they have inexpensive parts in those speakers that you're showing. There's not, super high end foil caps and stuff on there. There's just some poly caps on it. See all that surface reflection area there to each side of that tweeter? That's going to
Right.
make it sound as if it's coming more from that baffle. And with the
Oh,
wide off axis, I mean those on a solid state gear and in an untreated room, ooh man. And what's bad is, and I'll say this about the focal you're pulling up there, and it's the same with Wilson Audio. If you can take those to a show and just drop them in an empty room, and trust
right.
me, it happens, and you just drop in your high dollar solid state amps in there on them, and you start cranking it up, man, it will be too much. It's
Yep.
aggressive. It's way
Yep.
aggressive, and it can be harsh and hard, and you need the right everything to go along with using that tweeter. You definitely need a well treated room. You want to soften those room reflections. You want a
Right.
softer, smoother sound. You need the synergy to make that work. And so I applaud Wilson Audio for moving up or moving over to a tweeter that may be every bit as good, but is definitely more forgiving. You know, definitely a lot easier on the ears
A
than what a
lot.
focal could be.
Yeah, no, Focal. My time with Focal was great. There was a lot of resolution with Focal, but I have to agree that I always found myself putting out fires
Yeah.
with Focal. That's the best way to describe it. I had to look for warmer gear. This is the reason why you see Focal at shows with VAC tube
Hmm.
amplification.
Yep.
Ocuface, which is very warm sounding electronics from Japan. You'll see it with
Yep.
Macintosh as well, do the same thing. And that's the formula. I mean, this is what they have to do. And
Sure.
now they own Name, as you know, Name Electronics. So
Right.
Name sounds perfect because, again, it's tuned for that speaker to make sure that that speaker doesn't get out of control when it
Right.
comes to the upper registers. So, yes, everything you are saying about Focal, I completely concur. And it's been my experience